I'll call to order this District of Clearwater regular council meeting for Tuesday, March 15th at 2 o'clock. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are fortunate to be gathering together on the unceded territory of the Sim people who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. Are there any late items that anybody would like to add to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder for the agenda? Moved by Councillor Haring, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All those in favor? Moving on to adoption of the minutes. Are there, and you do have two sheets on your table that are part of the agenda, just for your notes, 14.3 and 5.1. So when we get to those sections, and the first one is 5.1. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting held March 1st. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder? Did you move? Yeah. Moved by Councillor Banford, seconded by Councillor Haring. All those in favor? Okay. Moving to page 2. We have a delegation with MLA Peter Milobar, but he's not here yet. So we'll just skip on to reports until he arrives. As Councillor Sim suggested, possibly caught in the pipeline traffic. So the mayor's report for the last couple of weeks, Friday the 4th, attended an online seminar with Indigenous Voices. Was it, who was the presenter on that one? Doctors of BC. So had two fabulous First Nations speakers, Jennifer Lewis and Harley Eagle, talking about a lot of how First Nations see things as simple as time and how that interacts with how to meet them and things like that. And it was, on your table is the flyer from that event. So if you know somebody that needs a First Nations speaker to talk about how to do business and how to do meetings with First Nations people, that they are two excellent speakers that would be worth contacting. On Saturday the 5th, I did a almost 3-hour incorporation study panel for OK Falls. It was very interesting. A lot of the same concerns that came up pre-incorporation for Clearwater also came up on that as well. So it was kind of a bit of a flashback in time. I was always surprised that Okanagan Falls, if you've driven through there, is not actually an incorporated town. So they're still in that position, and it's been around for a lot of years. So it was a great discussion, but yeah, roads, pools, seniors housing, bylaws, all those sort of things came to the front on that. Thursday the 10th was TNRD, where my motion for a formal TNRD apology to staff and citizens passed 22-4. And we've already had some positive feedback from TNRD staff on that one. So that's kind of nice. Friday the 11th, I attended the Climate Caucus Zoom call with Mayor Spencer Coyne of Princeton and Mayor Jan Polderman of Lytton, talking about their experiences through the disaster. Stephen Rice from Spencer's Bridge also participated a little bit in that. So it was really good feedback on kind of some of the hitches that you would hit in those sort of disasters. And one of the ones that was absolutely surprising to me is when you're dealing with relief organizations, you can turn your people over to, say, the Red Cross to sign up to, but the Red Cross, once it has that information, won't turn that information back to you. So you also need to have a parallel registration system for your citizens, because once they get dispersed out in the world, if you just let the Red Cross do it for you or another aid organization, you lose track of them. And that's happened in both Lytton and Merritt. So there were some great suggestions what we'll bring forward in our next planning session as to things that we should add to our emergency planning on things like that. Another one being have something set up for donations to go straight out the door, because trying to get that up and running during a catastrophe was very hard. I'm in the process of trying to set up a meeting to discuss the levels of initial attack and other BC wildfire supports to be stationed in Clearwater this summer. Not getting a solid response on what levels of IA crews will be stationed here this year, and that's a little concerning. Mr. Milobar is in the audience. He's taking note of that one. And starting this Friday, a fun one, I will be, myself and Gabby Wickstrom from Port McNeil will be part of a CBC 7-week contest panel to discuss the best small towns in British Columbia. So we'll be on CBC in Vancouver and maybe elsewhere, chatting up what's great about all the small towns in British Columbia. So that should be a lot of fun. I see Mr. Milobar, sorry, MLA Milobar has arrived. Come on up. We'll get on to your delegation.
Sorry about that. I hate construction.
The 1 hour and 15-minute drive is now 1 hour and whatever.
Yeah.
45 or 2.
I think he's got it.
Yeah. So
He's not quiet.
Okay.
yeah. So,
I'm just glad to find out it's supposed to be an hour and 15. So. It's out of the 45-minute drive.
Flying Phil Ghilardi is your inspiration for your lead foot.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, and as part of my yearly tour through the various municipalities that I'm the MLA for, so in the barrier and there are some peaks already, so glad to fit this into the schedule as well. Of course, we started the session 5 weeks ago down in Victoria, so I've been there since, so sorry for the delay, but if we don't get that sweet spot window, it gets a little difficult, but I'm glad that schedules align now. So right now in Victoria, we're dealing with the budget. So recently I was named our finance critic for us. And so I've been heavily scrutinizing the budget and trying to figure out where everything is and things of that nature. And so it's quite a bit of extra work, but it's a nice challenge. I strangely used to love budget season, municipal council wise. So I'm kind of envious that you guys are still dealing with budgets right now, but you're probably not. But there's a few things that are of interest for the area that I'm keeping an eye on, and certainly initiatives around highways are still an ongoing issue, especially post what we saw with the floods. There's of course the need to rebuild, but there's also the need to make sure that projects continue to proceed that were already planned for or being looked at. So I'm trying to make sure that those types of projects are probably most notably for yourselves traveling south is the situation just south of Darfield. And the ministry is well aware of that. I've had conversations with the minister face to face around it. They were actually supposed to start some geotechnical drilling in the fall, and then the floods hit. And obviously that's, one of those pieces where it's understandable given that the need to move some of those more technical skill sets around to try to get to some other areas quickly. So hopefully we'll be able to find out as we move in through budget with questions to the minister around what the new timeline is. Is there dollars set aside in the budget for it? There's every recognition that it will be a very complicated fix and a very expensive fix, even though it's a very short section of road. And so it is important that it's on their radar screen continually to make sure that moves forward. In terms of the budget overall, there is some concerning changes to some of the issues. There's not a whole lot of used car dealers throughout the valley outside of Kamloops, and there is one change that the government is now making to the used car sales for private sales, which will impact a lot of people. And in fact, in the budget book, it actually says it will directly impact low, medium income families as well as those in rural areas. And that's to do with if you put down on the transfer papers what you paid for the car, the government is now going to come up with a new valuation of what they feel each make and model and year is worth. If what you pay is lower than that, they want you to pay tax on what they say it's worth. And if not, you go to a mechanic and pay to have an assessment done, but you're still paying more to have that done to try to convince the government that the sale price is actually what you paid for it. So I think we all know people that try to help out a neighbor or a friend or a kid starting out next door or whatever, and give a pretty good deal to a vehicle to try to make it work for them, and compared to what you might get for a trade-in, and then you just hang on to that car and you sell it for the same, if not a little bit more. So we'll see how that unfolds, and that's a bit of a concern there. And then another piece I do want to spend a couple minutes on, because this is critically important to everyone in this room, and is the Electoral Boundaries Commission has started their work, and this happens every 8 years, so it's part of a regular occurrence that happens, and every 8 years the Electoral Boundaries Commission convenes to decide how the boundaries of each riding should be within BC. So we're up to 87. They've been given the ability to add another 6 seats based on population if they still choose. And so they likely will. We're fully expecting they will take that opportunity. So that would bump into 93. Now, the commission itself is a Supreme Court justice, the head of Elections BC, and then a citizen at large. And they're supposed to be nonpartisan and do their work. And so I have every faith in them in that regard. Where there's concerns is under the previous legislation, there was a protection for, I believe it was 17 ridings outside of the Lower Mainland and the island. And that was basically the geographic area north of Hope and the rest of the province that we usually characterize as north of Hope. And this really is not about partisanship. It's about the number of ridings that have MLAs. So that would be 17 ridings, 17 MLAs. And those were protected regardless of population. So what they basically said in the legislation was you have this big of a geographic area, go ahead and figure out where to put the lines, but you need to have 17 ridings within that geographic area. And then the rest can be down in the Lower Mainland and that. The government has removed that provision from the legislation. So there is no protection for that anymore. Where it becomes problematic is because if you do an averaging of populations, there is a great many ridings that are well below what would be a constitutional 25% threshold of a riding size for population. That means you could conceivably very easily see Peace River North and South become one riding, or potentially those two joining the Chaco Lakes to become one riding. Those three together is about the average population of one riding. That would be literally almost 1/3 of the geography of BC and one riding. And so it's a very scary prospect. I mean, my riding is considered semi-rural because it's, population-wise, obviously Blue River North is kind of my end point, but Clearwater is really the end of a node of larger population. So it's an hour and a quarter, right, to get one end to the other, not insurmountable. But if you start getting into those farther range areas, the Kootenays would likely drop from 4 to 2 ridings. When you consider 2 mountain ranges for some people to go over to try to get to an MLA in the middle of winter, that's problematic. Fraser Nicola would be a problem. Caribou Chicolton would be a problem. We figure there's the potential to lose 8 to 9 of those 17 seats. Couple that with the 6 new, you'd be looking at around 8 to 9 seats north of Hope, and whatever that leaves you with 85 in the Lower Mainland. So if you think there's a problem having your voice heard in Victoria right now, and again, we're not saying obviously where the lines on that map need to be. That will get worked out as well. But we are trying to say that there needs to be a recognition that large geography needs some reasonable access to an MLA, and the complexities that I deal with as an MLA are completely different than an urban-centric, 12 square block downtown Vancouver MLA would deal with, right? They're not dealing with forest fires and floods and rangeland issues and joint use issues and well water issues with the registration of domestic or commercial use of well water now and things of that nature. So it's a lot more complicated and diverse files that we deal with. And so my ask, I guess, would be for yourselves and everyone in the community, you can go online. We're not sure yet on the schedule for in-person submissions. They haven't posted anything outside of Hope that you can go to in person, first off. And so, but it is open to everyone, and it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter if, if you happen to be in Prince George one day and you saw that they had a hearing in Prince George and you walked in and they had space for you, you can speak about your riding down here in Prince George. They take information from anywhere in the province at any given time, but you can also provide your comments in writing. And that's very powerful and impactful as well. So I've been trying to spread the word as best I can to anyone and everyone, that it's really about just trying to make sure we maintain some level of numbers of MLAs in a very, very large and diverse geographic area of the province. You know, elections come and go, the political parties representing will come and go and change, that's fine, I get all that, that's not really what this is about. The NDP are at risk of a few of those seats, they would lose a few seats as well, with a few they have in the rural areas, if they start to amalgamate. So this truly isn't about like that side of it, it's really about just trying to make sure we have some semblance of access and voice, importantly, in Victoria. So that's that piece, and then the last piece I'll touch on real quickly is just the well water issue. So for anyone that is on well waters, this started in 2016. It's been carried forward. The final deadline was March 1st this year. There is a penalty fee you can pay right now to try to still apply after the fact. If you've not applied, I would suggest you do and encourage people to do that. We tried getting an extension, and that was rejected by the minister. But essentially what it says is if you are drawing well water for any reason other than domestic use, so anything other than your own inside of your house, you need to register, you need to quantify volumes you use, and there will be a fee associated with that yearly, and you will submit that, and it creates a registry and an understanding of how much groundwater is actually being used. So where you run the risk of just ignoring that is, at some point, if they start to realize who's still operating, and it won't be that hard if you're irrigating the field and have it registered, it will be pretty simple to drive by and go, how's that field still green? You know, you have to knock on the door, and there's the very real possibility trying to get access to water moving forward is very difficult, right? And it goes for if you're watering animals, if you have a feedlot, if you name it, anything that is not for your own internal domestic use, you need to register. And it's creating a lot of problems out there right now. We're working on a few files for a few people that have been classified incorrectly and trying to get their rates down. But it's definitely something people need to take seriously and try to get in sooner rather than later. So that's probably all the good news for Monday.
Yeah, thank you for the heads up. The cards for the well registration did come around in our community, so most people saw that, but the explanation was important to get out there. So we have the press here, so we've already done some. Are there any questions of Mr.?
So I've got like sort of a laundry list here. I'm sure it's all issues you're well aware, but I thought since you're here, I'd kind of like to run through all the stuff that's been percolating. One of the big things that we've been talking about nonstop is housing. I'm sure you're hearing that everywhere in your area. But specifically locally, I've been approached by a few people talking about building finance for individuals versus developers. So people are getting plans with their meet code ready to build, and a bank will deny them funding as it doesn't meet the bank's risk profile, right? So I'm just kind of, I guess, hoping that provincially we can start to look at banks and funding for individuals. We have such a shortage, and we have so many people wanting to move from the Lower Mainland, and they can't build because the cost of the lots now and the cost of financing that build is way outside of the reach of an individual. And I think it's come from the Lower Mainland, it's come from that representation being pulled away to the bigger centers, because we're finding out here, we can only build projects with the developer, someone who's hiring everybody else out. Thus the profits are going to a narrow group of developers instead of individual home builders realizing profit off of their own build. So if we can some way approach banks, fund programs, find federal support, all of that stuff to get building finance looked at and keep people able to build houses and address our problem with supply, because it all comes down to supply here. My concern is we're getting a lot of NGOs who are building, you know, sort of public housing programs, which are great and are like most housing vulnerable in Clearwater, but they don't know. So they're going to be reliant on that very NGO for supporting them. So the NGO takes the profit from their housing investment, reinvest it in their client. All along, that client is going to continue to need support from the NGO. No wealth generated. There's no pathway forward for that person. And we're doing that with all our new builds. I have a few others. If you want
One or two. If you want
one or two,
you can always send the rest of the list to Mr. MLA Milobar and they'll, like, you know, that I think the housing one, we've actually discussed that, and actually our CEO, Mr. Thomas, is discussing the commercial bank risk level assessment for Clearwater and then North Thompson Valley. The credit unions are fabulous.
Yeah.
But the commercial banks don't generally want to test tonnage construction builders here now. Higher risk.
Yeah, and there have been systems in Canada in the past which met those needs, and they're no longer this. The other thing I wanted to talk about was emergency management. We've essentially, we're seeing our support go away as the need goes up. You know, those floods, the fires, all that stuff. We're finding even the TNRD can't keep up with the demand within our own region. And we have, as you probably know, kind of all amalgamated in our region to fund a position in the TNRD. That position is no longer capable of meeting the need. So now we're taking a budget of around $10,000 and trying to do all our emergency management off the corner of desk of our fire chief, right? And as need increases, we're getting less support. We're left on the hook. And last year during the floods, the provincial government was very vocal about emergency management being the responsibility of municipalities. So if it's going to be our responsibility and we don't have the money, how are we supposed to do this? Right. So I'm just.
And to that point, I mean, there was been discussion in the budget this year around a year-round wildfire service. No clear understanding of the exact dollars they're putting to that, how it will relate to the updates to emergency management BC legislation. It's supposed to be coming forward at some point, probably in the fall, unfortunately, after another season. And then also whether or not that wildfire service is going to be a bunch of management, no offense to management, but management sitting in an office in Victoria, filling a building in Victoria versus somewhere closer that makes a lot more sense, like a central area, like a Kamloops region, Clearwater, and things of that nature. So those are the things we're keeping an eye on as they make these announcements.
Absolutely. We've had, as Merle mentioned earlier, our initial attack folks now can't live here due to housing costs apparently and lack of desire to come
There's a
here.
lot of doubt on that one, so.
Is there?
Yeah, we're gonna have to tackle that. We're gonna try to set up a meeting to get a clear answer on that one. Carol, Director Schaefer, and a few others. We're gonna have a discussion with Campbell's face on that. Go ahead, Councillor Banford.
Mine will be really quick, MLA Milobar. First one is a family transfer of a vehicle still okay? Can you still do it for $1? So it's not going to affect that aspect of it. A lot of times to pass a vehicle on to your son or your daughter.
Yeah, as I've read through the changes that they've made in the legislation, yes, that looks like the gifting piece is still there for the direct family members.
And the second question is, dealing with electoral boundaries, is there an online portal for comments? And I think 8 years ago, they actually had a place that you could vote online for the rural areas to say, no, we don't want it to change. Do you know whether there is a vote place online or is there a portal that everybody can comment?
It's not a vote, but it's definitely, there is an online portal. I can off the top of my head, I can't remember. Yeah, Shelley, I sent it to her.
You can put it in the minutes or something, Shell.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
Councillor Frizzle?
A simple question with the electoral boundaries. If this all happens, that's the way it is for 8 years. Is that?
You would finish the
Right. That's my concern, and not so much us, but the whole rest of the province and then down there. Yeah, that's my concern.
Thanks. And just on that sort of electoral boundary, I found it was really interesting that you represent 21,224 square kilometers, population 48,000. Down on the island, the Langford Wanda Fuca represents 2,447 kilometers and 51,000. So is there, in the discussions that you've kind of been hearing in the hallways, is there the discussion that we're going to amalgamate because of distance or because of geographic? So would we represent more people and then share that, or what do you think the flavor is? Because often it is the wider you are, the wider you get. Mm-hmm. And certainly representing, rural and making sure that that voice is heard. When do you think that they're going to announce the rest of the schedule? Because it's been very heavy, as you say. It's only been Hope and the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island, and that's it. So that's a bit of a, what have you heard about their timelines? Yeah. Right. And the last question, is there anything in the budget that you feel you've kind of got your eyes on for the North Thompson in particular? Oh, the school boards, we've got that because there's lots of space. Zero. So does that tie into, because I think the other thing council's concerned about is any future grants for infrastructure. And, there's the pandemic, kind of supports, but what about the nuts and bolts for communities? And was there anything, that you saw in there that would provide supports to communities. Mhm.
Thank you. Anything further? If not, thank you for your time, and yeah, we'll be in touch. Another note there is Director Schaefer and I are trying to get another meeting to talk about the Wellsbury intersection, because the improvements there don't exactly work that well. So we'll yeah. Well, you know, for that accidental hallway elbow that comes up, I believe Director Schaefer through the TNRD is trying to arrange that. So this time she'll take the sharp elbow up front. But if you're willing to come to the room, it'd be much appreciated. Yeah, so. But, yeah, so, thank you. Have a good day. Safe drive.
Moving on back to item 12, 12.1, Councillor Banford, you're up next.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. Pretty quiet week, couple weeks for me for council, really. But the big thing was that I had a cemetery advisory committee meeting, and that was on the 9th. And I have to thank our staff, Tammy. She's doing just an excellent job in providing information to that committee. All the members were present, so it was a good meeting. We did a quick review of the terms of reference just to update council a bit. We started looking at the bylaws. We got through about 16 points of 44. A couple things so council knows what's coming is the bylaw itself is a no improvement district bylaw that's been amended 3 times. The recommendation is going to come forward to council to develop a whole new bylaw with a whole new number. The other thing is the wording in the bylaw, being it's an old improvement district bylaw, talks about things that don't exist anymore, caretakers and a whole bunch of other stuff like that. So right now, staff are getting 2 other bylaws, one from Summerland, which is an extreme smaller community, extremely easy to read, covers a lot of the same points that our bylaw does, but in a lot better terminology. So staff are getting that, and we'll be looking at those 2 new bylaws over the next couple of meetings, and we're working our way through. So we're making some pretty good headway. So there's a couple points that are going to come to council for a change in the future. So that's my report.
Awesome, thank you, guys. I'm glad that's underway, and it sounds like getting deep into the work there. Councillor Frizzle.
Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. I attended the Tourism Wellsbury meeting in behalf of Councillor Sim, and I'll speak to that later. And just to let you know, the seniors are going to be having their lunches again in person, which they'll be starting on March 22nd, and the mayor will be coming to speak to them, and they're very excited to hear from you, Mayor. Yes, so yeah, that's exciting to get that back on the road again, or in the hall again, I guess. And the Alzheimer's support group started up full again, so it's really nice to be able to have the caregivers supporting each other again. So that I was really pleased to have them talking to each other again in person. So that's great. And that's my report.
Councillor Haring.
Yeah, so like everyone else, not much in the way of meetings between these last 2. One thing I did want to mention was just how appreciative I was of staff throughout this budget process. I think the budget process this year has stood out for me as one where the budget became very clear, sort of as we work through it. I'm super impressed with the level of information we got and how responsive you guys have been to what, we like to ask a lot of questions and poke a lot of things. So it's been nice to have your patience and walk us through it. I'm feeling super happy and comfortable about the budget this year. So thank you so much.
moving on. Councillor Mackenzie is stuck playing with trains again, but he was going to try to be here on time. The railway never stops breaking in the spring season. Councillor Sim, you're up next.
Thanks. I also joined you on the call for the cultural safety and humility, and it really was good. And certainly a number of people within Clearwater who joined on to that and bringing it back to have some understanding of the context of the conversation. I also sat in on a session that's called What's in Your Healthcare to Go Bag? And it was stories from Merritt, Logan Lake, and Lytton. And what happened in times of natural disaster to the healthcare component of their communities. And certainly in Lytton, and the fact that all of their health records, as we've read in the news, disappeared. But in Merritt, when your physician is asked to pick up and go, where do they go? And what do their patients do? And so looking at it from that lens. So I think we're going to bring it to a local health planning table meeting that we're going to have in April, and have that as a discussion that ties into emergency management. Because that's a high level of dependency that we have, and making sure that we all sort of intersect. So those were lofty conversations. The coffee house as part of the winter celebrations was terrific. I think our healthy living coordinator did a really, really good job throughout the entire event and tying different communities. Lots of new faces at everything, absolutely everything. Having the bus come to the coffee house was really fun. 70 people came out, and just really, really enjoyed it. So it was that slow and social model that seemed to work well. We saw the same, kind of enthusiasm. The Ski Hill did another live music last week. And again, really nice attendance, but that slow and social model seems to really work. I want to do a big shout out to hockey, but I'll let Councillor Taylor talk about the big things. But I think for me, what I really, want to express gratitude for is I look at my list of things, and there's like 10 of them here that are all volunteer dependent. So our U18 team was only made possible because 2 people outside of that age group, put their hand up and said, yeah, we'll stand forward and take it. And the team, is now off to Vernon next weekend and playing in something that nobody thought that they would do. And it's that volunteer commitment and passion. I love the fact that it's Rotary Richard time again, the fact that Rotary is still alive and well. The curling club, I'm very grateful the fact that they've been extending invitations to our local healthcare professions and hosting Monday night curling, which is really great. The Ski Hill, they've had the opportunity to have every class from Raft River go skiing. The Raft River Pack just bought snowshoes for every single, to make sure every student can go. So, and then the skating performance, which was also just so much fun. And Ken Matheson, hopefully that'll come out soon. But again, volunteer, volunteer, volunteer. So, although it's been a really crappy time, I'm just looking at the 2-year mark and just saying thank you to this community for lots of great things. So that's it.
That's also excellent. A good point to bring up. This is as things open up, the ability to have those volunteer come out of the ashes and restart. That's so important.
I have one more. I
Okay,
should have said
put
it.
it
I'm
in
so
there.
sorry. But just because of that, but so we've got this group through SD73, the Student Advisory Committee, and it's the high school students from all over the high schools. Anyway, they are gleeful, the fact that they are all going to get to meet. And we're really going to hope that we can put them all on a bus and bring them all to Clearwater so that they can kind of do a big tour. But they've been having kind of these networks, and they all want to have this. And so there is this great fire for our youth. And I just can't think of anything more, spectacular than that. So lots of good things.
You ready, Councillor Taylor?
I'm ready. Thank you, Mayor Blackwell. It's been a fairly quiet couple of weeks. The Trails Task Force meeting unfortunately had to be postponed, so we'll be meeting in April. But yes, I can't go without giving a huge shout out to our 5 amazing hockey teams who were all at playoffs this past weekend. 3 of every team represented Clearwater and made Clearwater extremely proud. 3 of those teams have made it to district finals. So I think this is the first time in probably 7 or 8 years that we've had 3 different teams in 3 different divisions win league and playoffs. So huge accomplishment for the volunteers, for the coaches, the kids. Although, some of them it's just about going to a hotel and playing in the pool, but but super exciting. And my son got his first ever penalty, so he was pleased about that too. So great weekend for the kids, great weekend for the parents, and three teams going to districts this weekend to do it all over again.
Excellent.
Congratulations to everyone.
Yay, that's fantastic. That's awesome. And a penalty, is that a pride thing there? Or?
He kind of glanced over at me from the penalty box and then looked away, and I thought, oh, he's really ashamed of it. But he told me afterwards he didn't want me to see him smiling.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. We have no committee of the whole minutes, but we have committee of the whole reports. And Councillor Taylor, you're first up.
Thank you. I think you give this. Oh, no, sorry. Apologies. We have our next meeting right now, actually. So there's a recommendation here that council enter a committee of the whole meeting of Government Operations Standing Committee. Yeah, so I move that. So yeah. Do I call the vote? No, you're still chairing.
And I turn the chair, the tiny little chair over.
You turn the chair to me. Thank you so much, Mayor Blackwell. So the first item on the agenda of the Committee of the Whole is approval of the age-friendly coordinator budget. Absolutely. We'll come and get you when we're done. Thank you. So I will hand over to Director of Finance, Ms. Klassen, to talk through the staff report.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. The report in front of you is self-explanatory. A member of council had come to us a while back and requested a confirmation whether the contribution of the Wells Gray Country Senior Society had an age-friendly coordinator portion in the budget, and it does in fact have about $10,000 as a line item. At the current time, this amount is funded by taxation, as we don't have an agreement with the United Way.
Okay, so then we have a recommendation that the government operation. Oh, actually, any questions before we get into the recommendation? Any questions on the report? Matt Blackwell?
Not a direct question, but just a comment. Considering, I think we've figured out that 54% of our population somewhere fits into the category of being serviced within the seniors community, even though a lot of them won't want to admit or don't think that they're seniors. This program has been incredibly valuable over the years, and it's been core service to that percentage of people that are served by it, especially the seniors lunches, the fraud prevention, the seminars on health, seniors abuse, and all that sort of thing. So yes, we've had other financial means of supporting this committee and the society and the lunches and the other things that this does. But I absolutely think
Thank you. Councillor Sim?
Yeah, I'll echo all of that. And I think that what's most important is that having this session, especially as Councillor Frizzle said, is the more in-person, is it's an opportunity to have eyes on our community members. And that's really important with the aging process. And one thing that I learned from the community Christmas Eve dinner is those eyes on people is what we need to be doing. Pensions aren't getting bigger. Costs are certainly, going further. So to have that coordinated program within the community, I think that there's lots of spin-offs from it that you just can't even evaluate the benefits properly. So I'll be in favor of this.
Any other questions on the report? So in that case, we have a recommendation that the Government Operations Committee forwards a recommendation to Council that the District of Clearwater approve the budget item for an economic development age-friendly coordinator for $10,000 in the 2022 to 2026 financial plan. Can I get somebody to move that? Councillor Sim, seconded by Councillor Banford. All those any discussion? All those in favor? And that's carried. Let's wait for Councillor Frizzle to return. Perfect. So we'll move on to 14.3, the draft financial plan. So again, we have a staff report here, and I will hand over to Director of Finance again, Ms. Klassen, to speak to that.
So the purpose of this presentation is to highlight the draft financial plan for 2022 to 2026 and for staff to receive council direction prior to bringing back the draft full financial plan. The financial plan is on schedule. A lot of work was done prior to me arriving here, and I really like to thank staff. Today, we're looking at a summary. We're not looking at the detail, as that has already been reviewed by council. And ahead of us is a development of and adoption of the bylaws and preparing the property tax notices to get mailed out by the end of May. So today, we have in front of us a public consultation and a recommendation from staff. Financial plan highlights impacts on residents, the big picture, putting it all together, next steps, and final resolution or recommendation. Just a note of caution here, staff are relying on information provided by other government agencies such as BC Assessment to calculate the estimates of tax impacts and rates. This is only a preliminary calculation and it will change. Also, the audit preparation is underway and reserves and surplus balances have not been finalized or audited. So moving on to the public consultation piece, the financial plan public consultation was in person at the Municipal Hall. There was also a presentation made available on the district's website. We had 5 attendees and 1 email provided as input, and the information was presented to council on March 1st. Staff is recommending that council resolve that sufficient public consultation has occurred in this recommendation. Would you like me to continue through the presentation, or would we like to discuss this?
I would assume we'll continue through the presentation and come back to the recommendations.
All right. Moving on to the draft capital plan. Projects in the draft financial plan total about $4.9 million. Some of the highlights that you will see in the plan are that trails is the largest amount at about $2.6 million. Everything in the trails capital plan is funded through grants except for $17,000. The large correct. Yep. The largest 3 projects are the Park Drive Trail, the Dutch Lake Trail, and the trail from Wellsbury Inn to Roundabout. In the sewer and water area, there's a few major projects. The major project, which is 50-50 between the two, is the TMX crossing. And cell 1 sludge drying bed for about $392,000. The TMX crossing is funded through surplus. And the sludge drying bed is funded through grants and other resources. Other projects included the Brookfield Bridge at about $180,000 and a backhoe replacement for $15,000. The Brookfield Bridge railing is funded through gas tax, and the replacement of the backhoe is funded through surplus. This is a chart that shows the funding of capital. It's difficult to see from far away, but it basically gives you the perspective of how the projects are funded. You can see that the 2% or the small taxation amount or $110,000 is funded through taxation. 66% or $3.2 million is funded through grants, 27% or 1.3 is funded through surplus, and 5% or 277,000 is funded through reserves. As well, we have special operating projects. What these are projects that sit in operating costs. They're not capital in nature. A few of these are funded, or about 10,000 is funded by grants and 82,000 is funded by through taxation. And these include items like strategic plan, hardware or software subscriptions, DCC bylaw updates, and fire department EOC grant funded. The previous slides, when we looked at the projects, this slide includes both projects and operating costs. This is what we call a waterfall chart, and it basically defines the changes to reserves and surpluses. So the blue bars, you have I wish this little point would work, but you have along the bottom axis is your reserves, and the blue represents money going into the reserves, and the orange represents money coming out of the reserves and the surplus. So the two that you are highlighted here are septage receiving. We have $420,000 going into the additional septage fees, and we have $1.5 million coming out of our surplus. And the little box on the bottom is just the detail representing those changes. This is a slide showing us the change, the impact of the change to over 2021. So in 2021, we had revenue generated by taxation of 2.737. Our current draft financial plan is just slightly lower at 2.717, so less than 1%. However, we are bringing into reserves 393,000. In each of those scenarios, from 1% through to 7, you can see on the bottom, the net impact of the increase is the additional amounts. Those additional amounts can be allocated to reserves or to certain or emergencies or what council wishes or safety for another time. Just to demonstrate, 2.5% additional taxation revenue over 2021 will bring in an additional $89,000 and will provide, $89,000 to be put to reserve. The distribution of, yes. I'm going to get to that point. In the next few slides. Yeah, we'll get to that. So the total property, current property tax assessments are not final, and we talked about that already. We use multipliers, municipal multipliers and tax rate to generate our mill rates. And we're using our utility tax class. There's rules we have to follow. And usually our residential is a multiplier of 1, and our utilities are much higher than that, and sometimes our business and our manufacturing are higher as well. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is that we're using those multipliers to get the allocation and the distribution among each of those classes in the district. So in 2021, our residents paid about 54% of all the taxes. in the draft 2022, it's about the same. However, in the draft, you'll see that there's a little bit of a change between utilities and business other or class 6. And basically what that is we're balancing those multipliers and allocations so that the utility class pays their close to their maximum of it's called 40, but not, anyways, close to the maximum of 40, and then it takes the burden off the business. That's what we're trying to do there. So the total Clearwater assessments, they've increased about 32.2%. It is made up of a market change, which just means increase in real estate values, and non-market change of 1.43, which means increase in numbers of roles. Yes, it would be, it could be new homes coming on the market. So real estate developer had closed. It could be additional changes or like changes to the purpose of the home, or so those kind of things. So it's not market driven, it's not real estate driven. Class 6 business increased 12.93%, and it's made up of 12.3 of market and very small non-market change. In these examples, we pulled four actual properties, and you can see that they vary quite a bit. So number 1 there in 2021, their assessment was $382,000. In 2022, it's $495,000. It went up 29%. In 2021, it was number 2 resident was $522,000, and it went up to $816,000. It had a change of 56%. What occurs there is if there is a neighbor, next door neighbor, or if it was sold, it will go at market value. It will, and it could very well be 56%. So in the business class, number 3 there, this particular business had an assessment of $333,000 in 2021, and it went up to $417,000 in 2022. Business number 4 had an assessment of $368,000, and it ended up being exactly the same at $418,000. We have seen numbers, and I do have them here. If you would like to see straight averages, just dividing the classes. So this graph shows the actual estimated amount that those individual properties would pay. The first column there is the stack where their estimated payment in 2021. The next stack is our current draft financial plan. So they're actually paying lower. For number 1 is paying lower. Number 2 is just a couple $100 more. Number 3 is higher, and number 4 is just a little bit lower. But since they're the same assessment, they're paying exactly the same. So just looking at this, the orange and the gray are the homeowners. The yellow and the blue are the businesses. So on the next slide, we're going to look at it a little bit differently. Instead of looking at what totally is paid, what they're totally going to pay, we're going to look at the change. So in our draft plan, you can see that the orange resident number 1, doesn't really have, it pays like $64 a year less in the draft plan. And in the 2.5%, they're actually paying $12.74 less. Yeah. The gray resident number 2, they will be paying more because their value, their assessed value is so much higher than the average. From instead of 32, they're 56. Yeah. The yellow and the blue. It is interesting because the yellow and the blue, remember, they're paying the same at the end, because they're assessed at the end the same value. But the change for the yellow business is paying quite a bit more because they were assessed less in 2020. Their assessment. However, the business number 4, the blue, they are going to be paying, in the draft plan, it was $167 less. But if you look at 2.5%, they would be paying $72.75 less. And the reason that the businesses are paying more is because, remember, their values were only 12.6 instead of 32. This is just kind of fun. Once you're doing graphs, you kind of want to look at, let's look at it one more level down. So here we're looking at what the change is per month for those 4 properties. And if you're looking at number 1, they're actually paying $5.37 less per month than they did in 2021. And if you look at it on the 2.5% increase, they're actually going to still be paying $1.06 less. However, the gray number 2 is going to be paying $28.89 more if you're looking at the 2.5%, and so on. And just to bring all these little pieces together that we talked about, and a lot of the meetings that you've had in the prior to today, is capital projects are at 4.9% funded mostly by grants and surplus, with a large focus on trails. Tax revenue generated over 2021, staff is recommending 2.5% increase. The straight average impacted to, if you look at everything as a straight average, it's barely, for residents, it's close to 0. We will be paying down debt at about $88,000. And we will be able to put some money into savings. We can choose to put it to reserves or to surplus. Staff has recommended to put it. Our next steps is to bring the financial plan to council for 3 readings and adoption, to bring the tax rate bylaw to council, to file our legislative reporting by May 15th, and to start the process all over again. And finally, our resolution.
Okay, any questions from staff on the report? Councillor Sim?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering now that with the recommendation of the 2.5%, do we see that in relation to the 5-year plan? When we started the process, we had all the nice grids. So there had been a point, and it was a bit worrisome about what 2023 might look like. Will we have a chance to kind of go through that one more time, just to make sure that we're setting aside enough so that we aren't going to set up the next council for any mishaps?
Yes. We will bring the financial plan bylaw to council.
And that's where we'll see it.
Yeah, we'll see that.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff? Mayor Blackwell?
Just a comment. Fantastic work, and being in a position with everything that's going on, that I actually pay less tax than they did last year by a small. Yay.
Any other questions before we move to the recommendations? So that yeah, at this point we are not voting on the tax rate. That will come at the bylaw point, but this is to move forward with the bylaw based on this draft plan. So, any other questions before we go to the recommendation? Well, I think we need, do we do recommendation 1 first? Yeah, so there's a recommendation, thank you. So there's a recommendation that the Government Operations Committee forwards a recommendation to Council that the District of Clearwater has held sufficient public consultation on the 2022 to 2026 financial plan. If I can get a mover, Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Haring. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that carries. And the second recommendation, that Government Operations Committee forwards a recommendation to Council that directs staff to prepare the 2022 to 2026 financial plan bylaw based on revenue generated from taxation at 2.5% over 2021, and the additional revenue to be allocated to capital and special operating projects will remain as presented. So Mayor Blackwell is making that motion, seconded by, if I get someone to seconded by Councillor Banford. Any discussion on that recommendation? Councillor Sim.
I think it's the 2.5. I know that there was lots of discussion and lots, but I do think that it's really important that surplus is attended to, given the fact that, you know, potholes are not actually traffic calming measures. You know, and so I do, again, looking forward to, you know, the next council is making sure that, you know, we're starting to build on, you know, that stability. Every family saves for the roof and the leak in the roof, and we're doing the same. So I'm comfortable there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Banford.
Prior to the vote, I just want to echo Mayor Blackwell's comment, and thank you to Councillor Taylor for leading the budget process and to staff. They put up with a lot of questions from me and a lot of probing, which is quite normal. Council can laugh, but I appreciate the time that they put into giving me the answers that I kind of need to get me to where I'm more or less comfortable with what we're doing. And for me, knowing that the average person's taxes are going to stay the same, even though we have a 2% increase, I can live with that quite easy. So thank you for your time for both Councillor Taylor and staff.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Oh, did I missed a part of that recommendation that there will be no further changes to, so do I call that again? Okay, they can forgive me? Okay. Okay. And so the final recommendation that we rise from the Committee of the Whole, if somebody can make that motion, Councillor Frizzle, seconded by Councillor Banford, all those in favor? I'll hand it back to Mayor Blackwell.
So moving on, we have a report on the page 13 to 17 of your agenda, which is about the decision of council talking about the election coming on October 15th, 2022.
Skipped a bit. We've got the rest of the committees.
Oh, I've got my pages backwards here. Oh, 3 and 4. It's such a short agenda. I thought I'd just move on. So, okay. So moving on to 14.4, community and economic development and infrastructure.
I think these keep getting mixed upside down.
This is Councillor Frizzle.
No,
Oh.
this is, so Councillor Banford,
Oh, sorry.
right?
Go ahead.
Because, yes.
Thank you. Parks and Rec, whoever that is.
That's me, and the social development, which is planning for fun events, that's
Yes.
me, May 3rd.
Thank you. Okay. Joint Services Advisory Committee. Oh, it's actually Council Haring. So we have to go there. Select Committee reports. Councillor Taylor, back to you.
So the next meeting of the Trails Task Force is April 12th. And I have two recommendations that the minutes of the Trails Task Force held November 9th, 2021 be received. So I'll make that motion. You're the chair.
Just want to get it done.
Call the question.
All those in favor?
And the second recommendation that the minutes of the Trails Task Force held January 20th, 2022 be received. I'll make that motion.
All those in favor? Thank you. And there's a third recommendation there.
None of mine.
Oh, I have one in brackets here, but okay. It's not finalized on my agenda, so I might have an early agenda copy.
Okay.
So we'll just skip past that. Community Economic Development Task Force, which is what I was thinking about, Councillor Frizzle.
To be announced. That'll be waiting until,
But we did have a meeting recently.
I thought we talked about that last
Yeah, we did.
meeting.
We did.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah.
But I will bring that up again at the part about the Forest Commission, which is coming up. Cemetery Advisory, Councillor Banford, you already spoke a little bit on that. Anything else you'd like to add?
Just the next meeting is on April 13th.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Frizzle is involved today.
Yeah, I attended the Tourism World's Gray meeting, and they talked a lot about the Visitor Information Center and our new manager and new staff, and we're excited about new prospects, what we're going to be doing there. And it was a really interesting meeting. I'm glad I attended because I hear a lot about it, but didn't really know what they were up to. So very informative.
And was lunch good?
Lunch was good. Yeah, it was good.
Wellsbury Community Forest Commission, Councillor Banford had a conflict last night, but I did attend because I am also on that. Grant that we're all warm and fuzzy about passed, but the other part of that event last night was doing some of the annual reporting and the Trans Mountain Education Fund, and 3 grants were given out to locals for their education through the Trans Mountain Education Fund, which goes on for a few years. But one of the points of discussion, because so many members of that panel are part of the corporation of the community forest, the society, and or the commission, was the desire by the corporation and members that are involved in all 3 to look for a signature community project to fund over the next few years. So I know that kind of thing is near and dear to a couple people here's heart. So they probably at a future meeting are going to ask for suggestions for the community of something with the several $1 million that they have in the various bank accounts. And I believe we have $2 million worth of income coming in this year. That's something maybe the community wants to focus on over the next 10 years that they could help maybe be the key funder on with grant participation and other groups. So put that in your thought process, and Stephanie can talk to somebody from the corporation or the board to maybe get that idea fleshed out a little bit. Going on to page 4 of the agenda, staff reports. Now we're to the general election, which is a decision of council. So you have a background report on your thing, and I'll let Mr. Penny speak to this.
That staff were working on trying to get a better assessment of costs and planning kind of a fallback option if we weren't able to secure a chief electoral officer to have people with experience come and give feedback. But in the process of that, we actually spoke to one of the people that John had earlier spoke to, who had prior election experience in Clearwater. And that person had actually reevaluated since John had asked them and was seriously considering taking up the position. So John's going to speak to them on when he gets back. But we're very hopeful that that might work out. So we probably just suggest tabling this for another meeting as well.
Excellent. Good to hear. Yeah, I mean, we obviously want to build internal capacity for this kind of thing. But if we can get through this next election with an experienced person at the rudder of that, that would be fantastic. So we will, everybody agrees that it's okay to table this? Okay, so table for now. But progress is being made, which is fantastic to hear. Thank you. Report on the seniors coordinator position. I think we covered that already. You don't have that on yours either, do you? Okay, we'll just skip past that one. Which means that my agenda, we're on to correspondence information items. So if there's anything you'd like to talk to on this one, shout it out. We'll go to there. Thompson-Nicola Regional District Building Inspection Services for February. Society of BC Veterinarians, Dangerous Dogs. Yep.
Question particularly on this one, I just wonder if we have any information on where we are with trying to find another veterinarian. Was a group that came forward that I think we provided some funding for a video or something, and I'm not sure where we are on that.
I think I'll leave that. Councillor Taylor can speak a bit to that, I think.
Yeah, I'm just aware that we have a large animal vet, a mobile large animal vet, Dr. Mulligan. He's set up operations. He's out of Heffley Creek, but will be supporting the Barrier and Clearwater communities as well. So yeah, he's up and running with a website. We don't yet have a small animal vet, but But
There
if
was
you have a
welcome
spare
reception
horse or
for 'em
cow,
On Saturday.
yes, yeah, I wasn't able to attend.
Excellent.
But yeah.
So
Yes,
we're
definitely grateful to have Dr. Mulligan. Absolutely.
excellent. So we need to still continue helping.
So continue on small animal support. Yeah.
Excellent. Good to know. Maybe I'll slip into my CPC stuff.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Attention. Hopefully that draws. Maple Ridge Public Health Orders. Funding for local climate action. I've been on a couple CEA meetings. I'm the TNRD rep for that, so interesting stuff going there. Trying to get some information shook loose on Clearwater. And the best part of this agenda, it is 21.5. All the coloring, it's coloring for skating appreciation.
Which is really nice.
Yes. And I did put out on Twitter the picture of the hockey skate with the Stanley Cup. That's a classic. And the disco ball. So that one got a little bit of attention around the province and was much appreciated. And the Canucks were mocked for that. So that's a sign of that. Okay, so we have no notices of motion. We have no other business. We have a 5-minute comments from the public. Questions, comments from the public. Hi. You can just stand there. You're probably loud enough, but I appreciate if you'd stand so we can, yeah.
Okay, hi, my name is. Oh, okay. My name is Leona Richardson. I'm really happy that we're finally able to attend council meetings in person. This is wonderful. We were going to, I'm part of the North Thompson Valley United group, and we were planning on doing hosting an Easter community event. Now we just found out the fire hall's doing one. So we don't want to step on their toes. They're happy to do it. And I'm just was wondering if the district would be interested in maybe we're going to talk about doing a spring fling, maybe sometime in May, get the communities back together again. As restrictions are being lifted, it's good for the communities to get back together. And is there any type of donation that we can ask for?
So we actually talked about that last meeting because
Yeah.
we're all pretty keen on it, and actually talking how we can bring together various groups to all hold something. So maybe looking at like the May Day parade weekend there. So working with Rotary, making sure that the ball tournaments are really well populated, get the ski hill involved. You know, if your group is keen to do something, so we really make it a community wide event. And so we kind of share that. So we're going to be looking at some planning. We're going to wait until the first week of April to get that and start doing some feelers. So it sounds like you're already well ahead of things. But yeah, we've definitely talked around this table about what it would be like to have, you know, dancing in the streets and lights and, you know, just really do it upright.
Yes.
So.
Yes. No, that sounds wonderful. And the group is definitely interested in.
Well,
you know,
that's
bringing
terrific.
The communities back together again.
Yeah,
It's
that's
been enough
exactly it.
isolation and division, and let's go and do what we used to do. Love our community, love our neighbors, support one another. It's time.
Well, it is
Yeah.
time. And I think we've also talked about, you know, after significant world events and how that there was that celebration that marked, you know, a time to move forward. And that's what I think we want to see the May Day long weekend be all about, and bring in all the strengths of the community. So yeah,
Thank you.
council's been super keen.
That's
Yes.
awesome, and we would be happy to contribute. We have volunteers.
Oh,
So-
is that Director Schaefer's hands going up for donation? Oh, we'll take that.
Director Schaefer.
I just want to say that every year electoral area directors within the TNRD are given a discretionary funds of $10,000. And we can apply for some. Are you a society or? Not registered anywhere.
But that's okay. You can come under the umbrella of the District of Clearwater, and we can work together, and then we can all apply together. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, just submit what you want to do as a request for funding to the District of Clearwater. Your original proposal with the Easter was a little too quick for our agenda because I believe you talked to somebody on Friday about that. But something in May is a lot easier to do because we do have to look at things a little bit and kind of make them mesh with whatever else we're doing. So yeah, put it forward.
That sounds wonderful.
Okay.
And I just have another question regarding, because this is budgeting. And I haven't actually gone to look, but in the budget, does it have breakdowns where specific funds from government grants, what their grants are, and what the allocation of the grants were used for? Like where the monies were they were placed?
Yes. Yeah, it's
So it
very
does-
detailed and it also, when we do financial reporting on the other end, it's also very, grants especially have to be very, very detailed
Right.
as to where the dollars go.
And that will explain it in the, because
That
I'll go
will be in-
check it out. I just didn't have time today.
Yeah, the budget document itself is, kills a lot of trees. We'll just put it that way. Yeah, it's spreadsheets like this with very fine print, but it's all there.
Okay.
Okay.
And one other question, are all council meetings in the afternoon? Because I know that there was going to be, there was many more that were interested in attending. It's just in the afternoon, it's sometimes hard. Everybody works, and I know you guys are working hard as well. It's just,
Yeah.
do you ever have evening council meetings?
We have consultation sessions quite often in the evening if it's something of interest. Like this is the largest attendance we've had at a council meeting for quite a while. Usually,
11 years.
the public we usually refer to is Annabelle, Goldie, and Cheryl Thomas was quite often the public. Stephanie now comes as the press as well as the public.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's something to think about for the next council. It might be a little bit hard to change it at this particular point. We used to have evening meetings. The problem with having evening meetings, it used to throw in the fact that we would have to sort of rush to 9 or 10 o'clock to get things done. This is the shortest meeting we've had in months. I'll get to you. Yeah. And the other thing is we had to pay staff overtime to attend them. So these people already work. Well, this class here has been here pretty much nonstop. I've been here a couple times on the weekend and I noticed the car here. So budget time is 60, 70-hour weeks. Generally doesn't go away. Our CAO is away on a holiday, much needed holiday for a few days while he can sneak off. Yeah, it is a pressure, but I do hear you. And we have actually discussed that in the last couple months about going back to a hybrid system where we have some daytimes, some evenings as a way of doing more public meetings.
That would be wonderful, because I think it's important for the community to take interest in what's going on in their community.
Oh, yeah.
And council meetings, I mean, that's what you're elected for, right? So I think it's important to take an interest. Glad that this is the largest amount.
If we were talking about a container bylaw or a
Yeah,
dangerous
that's
dogs,
it.
or we probably have something.
Noise bylaw.
Noise bylaw. We have something coming up about hockey. The sure shot thing. I'm sure that's going to come to councilor in a big way. We'll have 50 people out for that. We talk about passing 4.9 million-ish dollars worth of spending. We get 4 people.
That's a more priority to me.
and we, for the evening sessions, we even supply food.
Oh,
fruit trays.
there we go.
things like
I'll
that.
spread the word.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Thank you so much for your time.
yeah, no, thank you. Further comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, we have to move into in-camera. So there's a recommendation that somebody got. I have to read it legally on that. So there is a recommendation that meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91K of the community charter, discuss matters relating to negotiations, related discussions respecting the proposed provision of municipal service that are at their preliminary stages, and that in the view of council can be reasonably expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they are held in public. Can I get a mover and a seconder on that? Thank you. We will take a 5-minute recess. Bathroom break, smoke them if you got them, and then we have to go to a closed session to talk about